Hi everyone, I am Huiyin Zhou. I'm one of the undergraduate researchers of our project team, Geer Cemetery, Labor, Dignity, and Practices of Freedom. I'll do a little introduction for our team. Geer Cemetery is a historically Black cemetery in the Duke Park neighborhood of Durham, North Carolina. Started by three African-American men in 1876, it's estimated that over 3,000 people have been buried in Geer. A survey of Geer reveals founders of Durham institutions, descendants of plantation complexes, and families foundational to the groundwork of the city. The latest documented burial occurred in 1945, and like many Black cemeteries in the US, Geer faced a preservation crisis due to structural neglect. The Friends of Geer Cemetery, founded in 2003 by Robert K. Bryant, works to continue to uncover these connections and stories. This summer, our team joined this collective effort through unearthing the untold life stories and connecting them to the development of Durham. Today, each researcher will introduce their sub-projects and stories of dignity.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nyrobi Manuel, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm an undergraduate researcher, a part of the Geer Cemetery Project. For my individual project, I am investigating the relationship between the African American funeral directors and the Black communities that they serve in Durham. For this video, I hope to highlight the compassionate, warm-hearted, and influential nature Black funeral directors had in the Durham community. In particular, I considered the Scarborough and Hargett Celebration of Life Center because it had buried upwards to 700 out of the 3,000 known people in Geer Cemetery. I focused my research efforts on the Scarborough family and found that members of this family have been and are constantly inspiring and instrumental to the Black community of Durham. Not only did the founder of the Scarborough and Hargett Funeral Home, John C. Scarborough, establish the Funeral Directors and Morticians Association of North Carolina that still brings together those in the funeral industry, but he also founded the Scarborough Nursery School in 1925 in memory of his late wife, Daisy. The Scarborough Nursery School provided care for school children during the hours of their parents' employment, and Scarborough just really wanted to help provide better health conditions and care in the Hayti community, and he did this through the school. Clyde F. Scarborough was the superintendent for this school in its early years. She's pictured in the top left in the center in a group of nursery children in the 1930s. Time and time again in my research, I have found that the Scarborough family gave as much back to the community as the community gave to them. In fact, in 1951, Clyde held a monthly board meeting at her home. And rather than have this meeting at the school or another location, she held this at her home. And for me, it really speaks to her character as someone who wants her community to feel like a family, like a close-knit community, and her bond with the community was truly authentic and heartfelt. In the same year, the community members raised and donated $400 to the school for lockers, uniforms, food, and anything else that the school might need at the time, as well as giving $50 to the community bucket. The life stories of individuals and events are passed down and shared through organizations such as this one, such as Story Plus, and this is why I admire this work. I want to become part of the effort of mobilizing these stories to help keep them alive. And in my research, I love creating connections to history and stories and an attempt to create a snapshot of life for the Black community of Durham in the 20th century. I would like to thank you for watching and thank you for my colleagues, thank you for my team members, and thank you for my friends.
Hi, my name is Kerry Rork, and my pronouns are she, her. I am a part of the Geer Cemetery team, and I investigated African American burial practices and networks. In order to complete my project, I utilized a variety of sources, including life histories, particularly those who are foundational to burial networks, including churches, funeral homes, Black-owned businesses, among much else, photographs in order to read the physical space of Geer Cemetery, and newspaper clippings. For this video, I hope to highlight a few of these sections of my ArcGIS story maps that I believe highlight the work that I've done. The first network piece that I wanted to examine was the involvement of churches. I noticed right off the bat how tightly connected death is to the church community, as many of you, I'm sure, are aware of. But what I noticed is that it's not just a place of religious sanctuary, but rather, as this citation indicates, centers for recruitment for Black individuals into businesses like North Carolina Mutual that became foundational to Durham. And thinking about these networks as not separate pieces, but almost a web, that all of these different pieces work together to form the burial web that encased Durham. Next, I want to talk a little bit about some of the burial practices that I identified. One of the first was the homegoing ceremony. This was a concept that emerged as early as the colonial period, from what I've been able to find, in which enslaved individuals believed that death signified going home. In this context, it meant going home to Africa. This then transcended to connect to Christianity, as Christianity was imposed on these populations, to mean a sort of Christian homegoing, going on to eternal life. This is identified further through gravestones and considering how death is viewed not so much in a negative light as it traditionally is for many other communities, but in a positive light, almost a freeing kind of way. And finally, I considered the physical space, looking at what was actually engraved in these headstones that indicates something about the individual's life, what words were chosen to try to capture an individual. In my conclusion, I tried to capture Geer Cemetery within a greater context, thinking about Black grave sites is a greater movement of people trying to preserve these spaces from New York City to DC to Baltimore. And I just pulled a few articles here to show how prevalent this issue is of cemeteries being lost and their history being destroyed. I think this issue is so important to identify and think about as we go through this project. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed our video.
Hi everyone, I'm Huiyin. In my project, I am looking at Geer Cemetery individuals who were employed by the Duke family or Trinity College. I hope to uncover the African American labors that are often rendered invisible in white supremacist narratives. In treating every person as dignified individuals whose stories are worthy of being told, I created a collection of story maps that provide interlinking yet independent spaces to honor these individuals. For every one of them, I first provide a life history and then dive deeper into recurring themes of their lives with analysis. For example, in this case with James W. Loy, who had been employed as a janitor at Trinity College, I focused on uncovering his engagement in community organizing and critiquing the politics of memorialization on Duke's campus. I also embed small acts of resistance in my multimedia storytelling. For example, here I'm reproducing a 1920 letter from janitors of Trinity College. Their demands were really ignored at the time, but now I am reproducing their demands for everyone to see and reckon with the poor labor practices that continue to this day. You are more than welcome to scroll through this collection and explore stories of Caroline, Mary, James, Albert, and Aaron. They had been employed as house servants, as cooks, as janitors, as wagon drivers, etc., but their lives are much more than that. My team and I spent so much time diving into federal records, college records, and newspapers, and records of enslavement, etc. During the process, I constantly grappled with archival violence. Within the very little and biased archival sources about Black Americans, I needed to tread very carefully and try to uncover some possible truths behind the racist framing of these records. I found it harder to research women like Mary Sparkman due to their name change after marriage and the hazy categorization of domestic labor. As an international student, I was also challenged to learn more about contexts with which I'm not really familiar and lack embodied experiences. I tried to present these conflicts honestly, with a critical eye, and push the audience to reckon with these difficult questions as well. At the end, I'd like to thank our team members and mentors, especially our partners from the Friends of Geer Cemetery, and our collective efforts are part of an ever unfinished process of solidarities, of historical reckonings, and future making. Thank you so much.